Hey guys, in this video, we're going to take a look at a fairly recent release from one of my favorite budget brands. This is the PECRON E500LFP. And yes, PECRON did send me this review unit for the video, but no money has changed hands. They're not paying me, and they had absolutely zero editorial control on the contents of the video. So just wanted to make that clear. But you can think of this E500LFP as basically the E300LFP with double the battery capacity. And like the E300, this E500 has a pure sine wave AC inverter rated for a continuous 600 watts of output, and it has the same solar input capacity of 100 watts. And it also has basically the same input and output ports, just in a slightly larger housing, of course, to accommodate the larger capacity of 576 watt hours versus the E300's 288 watt hours. And even though it is bigger than the E300, I think you'd still easily put this in the subcompact category of power stations based on its size, and that it also weighs in at only a modest 15 pounds. So very manageable in every respect. But before we take a deeper dive into the capabilities of this little guy, let's jump back into time just a bit and see what it comes with out of the box. User guide. All right, looks like there is a cable pouch that you can snap around the handle in the back of this thing. So let's see what we get in the cable pouch. Looks like we get a car charging cable to a DC 5521. And we have a standard AC charging cable. And that's it. So no solar cable with this unit. That's becoming increasingly common, I've noticed. Used to be you would always get a solar cable, but you know, I guess really depends on what kind of panel you're going to get, and you can always match up whatever panel you get to the actual power station, and it should come with a cable, or you can easily buy one. So yeah, on the side, looks like we have a separate power button for a light, a couple of different lighting options, and then we've got AC charge port with a dust cover. And then over here we've got our DC 5521. Now this is where you're going to input from the car charging or from solar, as we just mentioned. And this says 12 volts to 28 volts DC with a 100 watt max. And you can over panel this. You could put a 200 watt panel on this, provided that that panel is not providing more than 28 volts. And that is the key critical piece here. You don't want to exceed that 28 volts input, or you do risk damaging the charge controller. But as long as you're under that 28 volt threshold, you should be perfectly okay. It does look like there is wireless charging on top of this. I like this. Is a cute little guy. This is just like a miniature version of its larger siblings. And then we do have a 10 amp 12 volt car socket right there with a couple of DC 5521 or possibly 25s. They actually look like these might be DC 5525 connectors. I'll have to correct that. One is a 24 volt 5 amp and the other one is a 12 volt 5 amp. And then we've got three USB connectors here. One is a PD100 that seems to be indicating that it is input and output. So you could charge this from the PD100 connector here with 100 watts in, as well as output to say a Microsoft Surface laptop or a MacBook Pro or something like that with 100 watt charging. We're going to test to make sure that you can actually charge it with that. And we're going to find out if you can dual charge it. Maybe can I charge it with that plus solar or that plus AC? I suspect you might be able to, but we'll confirm that. Then you've got two standard, looks like 18 watt quick charge type A ports. I think if I were designing a system in 2024, I'd probably recommend flipping that ratio around and getting two type C ports, one type A port, because virtually anything that's USB related that I get now as a new device is a type C port, not a type A port. So not really a problem, but you know, my preference would be more type C's, less type A's. Then over here, two sideways 3-prong AC outlets. We're going to find out whether this outputs 110, 120, or somewhere in between. Let's see if we can power this on. Looks like there's no master power switch. I guess we just press and hold any of the outputs and it turns on the main display. You can see we're at 65% state of charge. It does require a long press for the outputs. Here the fans kick on there momentarily. We'll find out how loud that actually gets when we actually push it to its limits. Let's see, is there anything on this side? Just a cooling fan and nothing on the back. So we got our little nice diffuse light here on the one side, along with the inputs, AC and DC inputs. And that's about it. You can see it's about the size of a good sized lunchbox. And it doesn't weigh too much either. I have to put the weight down here, but I'd say this probably weighs something in the 10 or 12 pound range. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump forward into time, find out how the testing on this thing goes. All right, this E500 does have a rated battery capacity of 576 watt hours. So let's find out how much of that we can actually access through the DC port. So I'm using my DC tester here, and typically these little car ports are rated for either 8 or 10 amps at 12 volts. So I've got my tester set to 10 amps. Let's just see if we can get 10 amps from it. I already have it turned on. We are reading 3.89, almost 14 volts. So let's go ahead and see if this will start up and whether or not that'll let us pull a full 10 amps. All right, we dropped to 11.8 volts, a little bit of voltage drop, which is typical. And we are pulling the full 10 amps. So let's let this thing run all the way down until the BMS shuts us off, and we will have tallied up how many watt hours we got out of that DC port. All right, our DC discharge test is done. Let's zoom in here and see how we did. It looks like we got a total of 467.8 watt hours. That's out of 576, so that's just a little over 81%, which is pretty average. So my average numbers fall between 80 and 84% typically on the DC discharge test with these particular testers. So that's a down the middle average result. All right, we are doing an AC inverter discharge capacity test to find out how many usable watt hours out of that rated 576 watt hours we can actually utilize through the AC inverter. All right, and this, contrary to the name here, E500, this actually is a 600 watt pure sine wave inverter with a 1200 watt peak surge rating. Now I've got this little 200 watt space heater here already blowing in progress. I started it with 100% state of charge, and you can see we are tallying up the watt hour. So if I go over here to volts, under load, we're at 118.7 volts, which means we are outputting 120 volts on this AC inverter. We go back to watt hours here. All right, so we're going to let this run all the way down until the BMS cuts us off, and it says it's going to be about 2 hours of discharge time, and we're going to find out what the actual usable watt hours really is through this little 600 watt AC inverter. All right, our AC discharge test is done. Let's check to see what the watt meter shows. All right, 500 watt hours. That's out of a rated 576 watt hours. So that is a slightly above average, 87%. So excellent numbers out of that AC inverter on this E500LFP. All right, since we are fully depleted, let's go ahead and connect solar, since it is, let's see, just about 7:45 p.m. and we don't really have any solar coming in. Now I need to be careful not to exceed the 28 volt max. So we're not going to ever get more than 100 watts in. So with a 100 watt solar panel, if you multiply that by 5, that gets us to about 500 watt hours of charged capacity on a good day of clear sun. So there are circumstances where you might do a little bit better than that, and some where you would certainly do a little bit less than that. But that is a pretty narrow margin of success for charging this in one full day. I think that 100 watt spec, if true, is a little bit on the low side if you plan on relying strictly on solar. If you have this all the way run down and you want to charge it all the way to 100%. But if you've only run it down to say 20%, somewhere in that neighborhood, and then you want to charge it all the way up, well then 100 watts should be more than sufficient for this size of a power station. But to ensure success, I would recommend over-paneling this at up to 200 watts, provided that that 200 watt panel doesn't exceed the 28 volts max, because you don't want to damage the charge controller. So as long as you're under that 28 volts, you can over-panel this. And that's what we're going to do for this test. All right, I've got my little multi-headed connector cable here connected up here to my solar input, and I've turned that on. It is detecting the connection, so the screen woke up, but as you can see, we're not getting any input, and we are at 0% state of charge. So we're going to leave it like this, check back in the morning, and see if it has resumed charging completely on its own or not. All right, it just occurred to me, I may have forgotten to reconfigure my 800 watt array, and I might have been putting, instead of 20 volts, maybe 40 volts. So I'm going to double check that. Yeah, we're getting 40.3 volts. So that was a huge mistake on my part. This has a maximum 28 volts, as I said, and I had this thing connected so that all morning it's been putting in 40 volts and clearly was not charging. But now the question really becomes, will it start to charge if I correct the problem? So let me go resolve that situation on my solar configuration, and then I'll find out whether or not I have ruined this power station. All right, I have talked many times on this channel about how to fry your charge controller and why you should not exceed the maximum spec input voltage on that charge controller, but I've not actually ever showed you what actually can happen, and until now, when I did it by accident. So if it can happen to me, it can definitely happen to you. It's something you want to pay attention to. Notice that I am charging right now at about 400 watts. So the power station is otherwise fully functional. I am charging via an AC input, but now DC charging, so charging from the car or charging from solar, is kaput. And that is my fault, and that is not covered under warranty. So now you know, you've been not only warned, but you've been shown what can happen. So don't make my mistakes. All right, let's do an AC load test on this AC inverter. This is a 600 watt inverter, as I think I mentioned. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn this on, and we're gonna start powering a load. And we're gonna see if we can get this up to about 600 watts, and then see if it'll run that continuously without shutting down for 10 minutes. And as you can see, I've got a load applied. It should start counting up. All right, we are currently at just a hair over 400 watts. Let's go ahead and see if we can take that up to 600 and see if we can hold that for 10 full minutes. Start the timer. All right, just a hair over 600 watts. No problems there. So it definitely passes the load test. And I think the decibel meter didn't get above something around 56 decibels, I want to say. But I wouldn't call this a silent unit, but it is relatively quiet, especially for these smaller ones, which tends to be a little bit noisier, at least in my experience. This is like a little white noise machine. So it's definitely not something that would bother me if I was trying to sleep near this. So let's go ahead and see if we can add just a little bit of load to this, just to find out kind of where our cutoff is. Let me just start by adding just a few more watts. All right, 634. Interesting, there was a brief interruption, it looked like, when I plugged that in. So 638. Seems like we're still cooking. So it does seem like it lets us run over that 600 just a small amount. Let me go ahead and take the charge speed up another 100 watts and just see what that does. And that immediately trips. Okay. So it looks like you got a little bit of headroom on this E500. And I'm going to go ahead and shut off the inverter here. But yeah, so you can get away with up to about 630, 640 watts maybe. And then it's going to shut you off. So that actually exceeds its spec a little bit. So again, excellent performance from this E500. All right, let's do a harmonic distortion test on the AC output for this little E500LFP. Find out how noisy it might be. And we're going to use an old guitar amp with no noise suppression, not even a grounding pin. We're going to find out if this thing is noisier when plugged into the AC output of the E500 versus grid power. So I've currently got it plugged in with grid power. Let me just get a baseline and find out what it sounds like through grid power first. All right, so a big pop at the beginning and then a very slight buzz. It is audible, but it is not prominent. Okay, let me plug this into the AC inverter on the E500, and let's do that test again. Yeah, you definitely do hear some additional noise. Now, I think I would characterize that additional noise as moderate. So it's not severe, but it's not minor either. So I think your mileage may vary and you want to be careful. And this is kind of an odd use case for this particular size power station anyway. I just wanted to give you an example. If you are going to use it for remote amplification power, you might consider using a line conditioner on there just to clean that up a little bit. It may not be enough to bother you, but be aware that it's probably not super clean to the degree where it's something you don't have to worry about. So just keep that in mind if that is a use case you're interested in. All right, we're going to do a basic UPS test here. We're fully charged 100%. Our little UPS icon is illuminated here, and I've got my laptop being powered while the grid power is providing power to the E500. Now I'm doing a sequential disk read and write test over here. So we got some activity on the screen. I do have the battery removed from the laptop, so it is fairly sensitive to power outages, as we'll see. But let's go ahead and see what happens if I simulate a power outage. Here we go. See if the laptop stays running. 3, 2, 1. All right, laptop stayed running. So basic UPS test is a pass. Now, I will say that I did run this test on my gaming PC, and it did not pass. So I would say be careful about the UPS application. This is not a quick UPS. It is a relatively slow one. So it's probably good for things like internet routers, internet modems, CPAP machines, things like that. But I wouldn't trust it for higher end computing applications at all, you know, gaming, that sort of thing, because I suspect it will shut down on you. So that's my 2 cents on the UPS compatibility of this particular unit. So yeah, I wasn't able to complete the solar charging test since I did fry the charge controller. But this no doubt uses the same charge controller as the E500LFP, which definitely did pass the solar charging test with flying colors. So I'm pretty confident that this E500LFP would have passed as well, as long as you didn't exceed that 28 volt DC input max like I inadvertently did. But that self-inflicted mishap aside, this E500LFP did perform well in every other test that I threw at it. It's definitely a solid performer like the other members of the PECRON lineup. And I do like the fact that it's got this little cable bag here and that conveniently snaps onto the little handle in the back. But what I really like about this E500LFP is that it still manages to be extremely affordable like the E300LFP without sacrificing nice-to-haves like wireless phone charging and mobile app control, but it also gives you twice the battery capacity of the E300, which opens up a lot more options for you, like being able to run a DC fridge for a reasonable 24 full hours, or maybe back up and run your internet router and modem for maybe 40 hours, or give you 2 full nights of power for a CPAP machine, which is actually a pretty common question that I get in the comments. And by the way, if you do want to find out what other kinds of things that this E500 can run and how long it can run them for, I'll put a link down below in the video description for you that you can go and download my Google spreadsheet. You have to download it. You can't edit it directly, so download your own copy first. Then you can plug in the inverter 600 watts and the battery capacity of 576 watt hours and plug those numbers in, and it'll give you all the information you need to know. So to quickly go over the pricing on this, it's available on both PECRON's website and also on Amazon for about the same price, I believe. And at the moment, that price is just $269, which is already a solid deal on a power station with almost 600 watt hours of capacity. But it gets even a little bit better than that, since PECRON did send me a discount code, and that'll get the price down even lower. And per usual, I'll leave that along with the links to both Amazon and PECRON's website down in the video description below. So the bottom line here is that if you're looking for something inexpensive and you're not trying to do more power intensive things like run heaters or heat water or maybe run an air conditioner, you know, things that are going to need definitely more than 600 watts of continuous power, then this E500LFP is probably a good fit for you. Okay, I think that's a wrap on this review. Hopefully you found something useful in there. If you did, please consider clicking on that thumbs up button for me. Very much appreciate that. And please do let me know if you have any questions that I haven't answered already by leaving a comment below, and I'll try my best and get back to you with an answer if someone else in our growing channel community doesn't beat me to it. We've got a lot of great community members now who are willing to share their experience, so we can all benefit from that. I do sincerely thank you for watching this video with me, and I do hope you'll consider joining me for the next one. Until then, have fun out there.